Our family is a little unique. We're very active, we're very loving. My wife's name is Rebecca Anderson, and she is a gemologist. And I met her in Southern California, and we actually met each other passing on a sidewalk street.
My husband, he is definitely my knight in shining armor, the man I waited for my whole life, and I love him very much. He's a great husband and a great father.
Super Ubi, shoot the Ubi, dead Ubi, toot alive Ubi, big fat mama Ubi, Ubi drama, camel, moose, fish, Ubi.
My oldest child, my son, his name is Axel. He's just good as they come. That's my son. Just a very loving child.
And sometimes he goes by Jake, and other times he goes by Axel. Liviya is our second-born. They're 2 years apart. She's a sweetheart. She's the funny one of the group. She takes after me.
She is a spirited 7-year-old who is the biggest tomboy you've ever met. Loves her brother and her family and bugs and horses.
Sleeve up.
I think I'm brave because I've been through over 100 shots.
Okay, just relax your arm, Livy. You gotta relax that muscle, otherwise it hurts. One, two, three. Good girl.
Ow!
Going slow, going slow.
Ow!
Okay.
Ow!
It was summertime, or the end of summer. She was playing outside a lot on her bike and scooters, and we thought, gosh, she is just really playing so hard. And she must be falling a lot or wrestling a lot or something. And we both made comments about how much her legs were bruised.
I was tucking her in, and I noticed that she had bruising all over her legs, a serious bruising. There must have been 50.
And we asked her, you know, what's going on? Oh, nothing, Mom, I'm just playing. And so we didn't really think too much about it.
I went away on another business trip. I was sitting on my flight home, and I was talking with Rebecca before I had to turn my phone off. She said that Liviya had been running a fever for a few days, and she was going to take her into the pediatrician just to see what was going on, see if it was strep throat, and get her some antibiotics. By the time I landed here in Raleigh, there were 5 messages from Rebecca in a complete panic.
On our way to the emergency room, when we arrived, all the nurses was wearing a mask. You know, I'm like, gosh, is she contagious? Or what I didn't know at the time was that they were so concerned to give her another virus that would potentially kill her. We had a team of doctors, and they were giving her blood transfusions immediately. Brian and I were just stunned and dazed. They found out that her platelets were critically low, but also her red and her white blood cells were also critically low at that stage.
We simply didn't know, and unfortunately, neither did the doctors. They were saying, maybe it's this, maybe it's leukemia. This was a hospital where they really aren't specialists in this area, so they really couldn't tell us much until we got to UNC. Once we got to UNC, all we knew was that her bone marrow wasn't working.
You know, our daughter is in a critical situation. We do not know what's happening with her, and theoretically, you could lose her at any moment.
So our bone marrow makes our life's blood, our oil for our machine, and her blood was worthless.
She could start hemorrhaging and bleeding internally in her brain is what their major concern was, that she could have just fallen. She could have just been sitting there and bled out.
They pointed out the window and they said, you will go to that building on Monday. I'll never forget walking down that pathway, and I was carrying her, and I looked above the door that we were walking through, and it said, Cancer Clinic. And I'll never forget that.
I first met Liviya in the fall of 2010, October 2010, and she had a very typical presentation. She had fever, pallor, and bruising.
He said that it wasn't until we were able to do a bone marrow biopsy to be able to tell us with any certainty what was wrong with her.
And then we went ahead and got our bone marrow testing done and found that her bone marrow didn't have very many cells in it.
He sat us down and he said, I have the results for the leukemia test, and Liviya does not have leukemia. And Brian and I totally like high-fived, and we're like, right, she doesn't have leukemia, and we were celebrating. We're like, okay, give us the antibiotics to, you know, get her through this little virus, no big deal. This is great news.
And he leaned forward and with a very straight face on, he said, you wish it was leukemia. Because we would know what to do. We would know what type of leukemia, and we would know the treatment, and we would have a path to follow. She has something called aplastic. She has something called aplastic anemia.
It's not a common disease by any means. Most blood diseases aren't very common, even leukemia. What's particularly disturbing is that it's an unusual disease, but it affects young people. It's usually out of the blue. So they've been perfectly well up until that time, and then they suddenly are faced with this really awful disease. Aplastic anemia it's a human disease in which the bone marrow is affected. It's one of the forms of bone marrow failure. The bone marrow is where blood cells are produced. These are the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. Those cells are made in the bone marrow. If you look under the microscope at a normal bone marrow, it's full of the precursor cells, the cells that are going to become red blood cells, white cells, and platelets. So it's the factory for the blood. It's where the blood cells are made. In aplastic anemia, the bone marrow has failed. It's not working. It's like peeking in the factory window, and all the equipment is gone. There are no workers, there is no machinery, and it's vacant.
She caught a virus that if you were to give the same virus to 20 kids in the same room, all 20 kids would have a different response. In Liviya's case, the virus went in and affected the proteins somehow, where the T cells went and started labeling everything. In doing so, it turned her bone marrow into mush. The virus caused Liviya to kill herself. And if it hadn't been caught, she would have.
The consequences of that for the patient, especially in the severe form, are awful. So there are no red cells. What does that mean? That means that the patient becomes anemic. They don't have red cells that carry oxygen. So typically people feel fatigued, short of breath. The white cells fight infection, and when they fall to very low levels, patients become susceptible to infection. And they can have life-threatening or mortal infections. The platelets help the blood clot. And when the platelets are at very low levels, blood clotting is impaired. The preferred therapy, when it's available, when it's feasible, is a transplant. And that's done by taking the bone marrow from, in almost all cases, the bone marrow from a sibling. That's a simple blood test that's done. There's a 25% chance that a brother or same parents, that a brother or sister will be a match.
With the bone marrow transplant, you're basically cured. That is a cure.
So we put all of our prayers into that. And personally, I thought for sure he would be a match.
And I'll never forget, it was a Wednesday afternoon, and he said Jake was not a match.
I was devastated. I remember screaming into the mirror, just begging God to take me and not my daughter. You know, that's pretty much it, is that I just begged him not to touch my daughter.
Unfortunately, for most patients, a transplant is not an option. And so those patients are treated with medical therapy, which is immunosuppression.
I was just relieved. It's like, finally, we're doing something for her. As scary as it was, I wanted to get started.
The way immunosuppressive therapy is almost always given is as a drug called antithymocyte globulin, or ATG. And this is a collection, it's a hodgepodge of antibodies that are made in horses. The horses have been immunized with thymus cells. These are actually normal thymus cells from children who are undergoing cardiac surgery. So essentially what's being given to the patient are antibodies that are going to find and destroy that patient's lymphocytes. And that's approved therapy for aplastic anemia in the United States, and it's commonly used elsewhere in the world.
You know, how cool is that? You know, you love horses, you ride horses, you draw horses.
She thought this was cool because she's going to be part horse now.
You know, it's going to be a horse that saves your life.
Did you want to say something since I'm filming you?
They get the drug over the course of 4 days, the ATG, and then they're followed for several months looking for a response.
The chances of them having a response and having disease-free survival typically will quote a 50 to 60%.
And as treatments went on, you saw her little light was getting dim. And this was the time when, tucking her in, she started asking questions like, "Daddy, why is God doing this to me? Am I going to die?"
And my parents said, "You don't know what you're in right now. This is very serious. And you don't know if you're gonna stay alive or if you're gonna die."
It was important that she was taking her medication. And when she wouldn't, I had to describe to her that she may not be with us, that this isn't a game where you win or lose and the next day you try again, that this was for real, and that if she lost, that she was gone.
Liviya had spent lots and lots and lots of time in the hospital, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And she's got tubes coming out of her heart, coming out of her arm, coming out of her hand. She was lying in bed and I couldn't get her to do anything. I couldn't get her to talk. I couldn't get her to say anything. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, this is it. I mean, she's gone. Her spirit is dead.
Dr. Weston said he's been doing this for over 20 years and he's never seen blood counts come back as fast as he saw with Liviya.
The first goal is to not have to give patients red blood cell transfusions or platelet transfusions. She presented in October, and really by December she was transfusion independent. All 3 cell lines responded very well. She's had one of the best responses I've ever seen.
Her immune system was at 0. And I remember asking, is it really that necessary for her to go back to school? Because a school is an incubator for every disease and virus and bacteria. Why would we subject her to those types of infections when she has no way of fighting them herself?
Okay, you need to go brush your teeth and then we gotta roll.
It was more important for her to be surrounded by her friends and her normal day-to-day life, and that mentally helps you recover.
We have seen beauty and strength and spirit and compassion from so many people, strangers and acquaintances and dear friends and dear family. You know, without that, we wouldn't have made it through.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
She was fresh out of the hospital, still, kind of new to this disease, and she came back in January like a trooper. You would have never known that there had been anything wrong with her, and I think the children all treated her just as they had the day she left.
Does anyone remember
She's always a leader as far as answering questions in class. She performs well. She also is willing to take on any new challenge that I give her. I think she's a bit of a risk taker. See plants? What's another thing, Liviya?
Horses.
Horses are in nature. They definitely are. Animals in nature. Let's keep reading and find out what else.
How she wanted to spend her life. She would learn all she could about life. I like reading because it could be about something funny or something sad or something scary or something unusual, and you just never know what the story is going to be about.
Okay, if you were going to listen.
And my mom and dad always say you don't judge a book by its cover, because you never know what the author has written.
She's fearless on the playground. She will do anything. She will do any flip, any jump, play on any equipment. She's very strong. She is very determined. I don't think that this disease has slowed Liviya down a bit.
One more. Axel.
Raleigh's community is pretty tight, and word gets around. The Carolina Hurricanes reached out to us and asked if they could do something special for Liviya.
It goes to show we are in a very special place where people, they want you to know that they care.
We are so lucky that she's with us. If she wasn't, we'd be devastated. You know, she's a life sponge. She just loves it.
Here, let's let everybody have some. Come here.
This is a hurricane warning tonight. Liviya Anderson, a 70-year-old who is finding her way back to health for aplastic anemia, and her brother Brian Anderson will share the center and call the team out tonight to the start of tonight's game.
I was really excited to be up there with my dad when he did the siren. It was awesome.
The Carolina Hurricanes are the 2006 Stanley Cup champions. They actually went to the Stanley Cup the year we moved here. You know, I love hockey, and I was trying to teach the kids. Cam Ward is the goalie for the Carolina Hurricanes, and he has a suite where he donates the suite to children that have disabilities or are critically ill.
I can't believe that we are actually in the box of the goalie for the Carolina Hurricanes. What a once-in-a-lifetime experience, just to see the kids just totally having an incredible, magical moment.
Tonight. Liviya? Happy early birthday.
Good.
Fun today?
Were you up in the suite?
Are you 7?
Tomorrow I'm 7. Are you older than me?
Yes, I'm 10.
Ah.
I liked Cam Ward because he let us use his box and he signed my jersey. He's really nice.
Game night, Ward.
Thank you so much. Did you have fun?
How cool was that?
That was amazing.
Liviya takes writing lessons. Bonnie is the trainer.
Come out straight so you don't stand on your toes.
You make your arm straight. There you go. Okay, tell him walk. I think she has a very special connection with the horses. I think she appreciates the horses. There's a love there. She's doing very, very well for a very young rider. Working with Liviya in her riding lessons and getting to know her and her family just really makes you realize how blessed we all are to have our health, to have our children, and to have the medical research that has gone on to bring these treatments.
Right now, we are just over a year from her diagnosis. She is doing so well that Dr. Weston just took her off of her last medicine as of Tuesday. And so this is the big test to see, you know, if her body has been reprogrammed.
Right now, Liviya is treated. She responded to treatment, but she's not cured.